The perfect choice for your next event. Hockley Valley Resort. It's how we make you feel. Check us out at Hockley.com.
The Night Side continues with host Barb DiGiulio on NewsTalk 1010.
Welcome back to the show. Great to have you along on this Tuesday evening. This is an ongoing issue, and it's something a story I've been covering actually going back to my sports radio days. And there is a new development. George Chuvalo, everybody knows who he is, boxing legend. Well, apparently his wife has scored a big victory against her stepkids in her fight to bring the Canadian boxing legend back home. An Ontario Superior Family Court judge has dismissed an application initiated almost 4 years ago by Chuvalo's two adult children that sought a divorce for their dad from Joanne Chuvalo and tried to have her evicted from the marital home and placed under a restraining order over their allegations. She was a drug-using, gambling-addicted gold digger who depleted $500,000 from the couple's bank accounts. Joining us to talk about this story is Laura Paris, associate lawyer with Shulman Law Firm. Hi, Laura. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So what was the victory for Joanne Chuvalo in this latest battle?
So my understanding from an article that I read, I actually did try to find the actual case, but I was unable to find it. So my understanding from the article is that essentially what happened is all of the children's claims have been dismissed with prejudice. So when something's been dismissed with prejudice, it essentially says you can never come back and make these claims.
I guess what the kids are trying to say or trying to prove is they feel that their dad is not, I guess, capable of making certain decisions, and they feel that he is being taken advantage of by his second wife. And do they actually have guardianship of him?
My understanding is that they have power of attorney, which gives them the ability to bring legal claims on his behalf.
If he's incapacitated?
Correct.
And has that been determined, do you know?
So from the short research that I did do, there was case law I was able to find where it was confirmed that he is incapacitated. So and it was with respect to the specific issue they were dealing with was whether or not he had the capacity to reconcile with his spouse, and it was determined that he did not.
So without speaking directly about this family, because I don't know them personally, you don't know them personally, but I'm just looking at the general picture of somebody who remarries. So there's a second marriage, which can sometimes tend to be, it can be tense between the new spouse and the kids. And then to have both the kids as power of attorney creates this interesting scenario. If the kids are not happy with the new spouse, it creates this unique battle where the power balance seems to be with them.
Absolutely. So it's a very interesting case and unique. You definitely don't see circumstances like this come about often, especially when you're dealing with the capacity issues. This is something that's going to transcend amongst family law, estate law, and then also to law surrounding capacity. So it's definitely interesting in that sense. And when you're dealing with these capacity issues, definitely there does become a bit of a power imbalance. Where you're fighting between who actually is representing the specific person's best interest and who's actually telling the truth on their behalf. So in this situation, you had these competing stories, one from the spouse and one from the kids. The kids who believed that their dad shouldn't be in this relationship anymore and he should proceed with the divorce because they felt that she was recklessly using the funds, and then her on the other end who was of the belief that they were still together and that they were, wanted to stay together and everything the way it was correct. So you definitely have these types of power imbalances within this context. For sure.
It seems to me very unusual, and you can tell me if I'm right or not, where you would have a situation of, I understand power of attorney, doing certain things, but moving to have someone be divorced if that person is incapacitated. Does that happen often?
This is the first I've heard of it. And again, I tried to do a bit of quick research to see if this is something that's come before the court before, and I was unable to find anything. I would definitely say that this is not something that comes across the court often. And again, it really, because it does touch on different areas of the law, there's probably a question as to what's the best forum to deal with this. Maybe it needs to be dealt with in a capacity court before it proceeds to a family court. So it's definitely a very, very unique situation. And I think what's interesting about it, and likely the reason why it was decided in the way that it was, is that you need to be careful when you are giving, power to a third party to decide whether or not someone is in a relationship, should be in a relationship, whether they've separated, reconciled, etc. How, as a separate individual, do you have the ability to make that statement or decision on their behalf? It's a very, very interesting concept to think about.
So not surprising to you that a judge would refuse to grant something like that?
Not entirely. I mean, again, I don't know all the facts, but I do think that you can certainly put a floodgate argument up towards that if we allow children to be able to dictate whether their parents are in or not in relationships. What does that mean for the law moving forward and the types of claims that are going to come before the court? Yeah,
that would be wild. I have another question about power of attorney that I've just sort of been curious about. So they have, say, power of attorney over his financial matters. And, okay, say not George Chuvalo, but somebody is not mentally incapacitated, but say they're in the hospital and have had surgery and aren't able to get out. Can they then use their power of attorney to do business for them? Or do they have to be mentally incapacitated?
No, there's different types. So this falls a little bit outside of my scope, but there is you can have a power of attorney to dictate your affairs, whether or not you're capacitated or not. I don't believe that is a requirement to having a power of attorney. Okay. There's a lot of, older people who will get powers of attorney, give a power of attorney to their children because it's just easier for them to deal with those sort of financial affairs than it is for the elder person who may, for whatever reason, have a language barrier or something of that nature that just makes it easier for the kids to deal with it.
With this Chuvalo story, it's interesting because thinking about, she's the second wife. And then I'm reading this story. She's been married to him for 25 years. I mean, it's not like they just got married 2 years ago. And it's pretty amazing how second marriages can just create so much tension with kids, but even that many years later.
For sure. And I think you start to see these things become, the issues start to become more relevant and apparent when you're getting closer to the end of the road for the parent. Because essentially, if they're still in a relationship, then there's going to be some sort of, if it's a marriage, there's going to be equalization of some sort, right, or splitting of assets of some sort. And that is ultimately, if you have an inheritance that you're expecting to receive, it's going to impact your inheritance. So I think that's why even with the length of a relationship, you see the issues start to come about closer to the end of the road for the parent, because that's when it starts to affect whether or not the amount of money that they're going to receive as an inheritance.
Interesting. Laura Paris, thanks for this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Associate lawyer with Shulman Law Firm. You're listening to The Night Side.
Many adults living with type 2 diabetes also have a history of cardiovascular or kidney disease. If you're one of them, please listen carefully to this message. LMC Mana Research is conducting a research study of an investigational medication for type 2 diabetes 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 for type 2 diabetes